Good morning, everybody. How are you all doing today? Hello there, beautiful. My name is Joesephyr, and welcome to a bit of an anomaly video for me. Like, I'm doing a mix and match of a live Should You Pull. As you can see, my Twitch chat is down in the corner there. For this surprise banner that we got, which, while not entirely surprising, because we knew that Noctis was going to come eventually, we didn't know that Vanille was going to come alongside him, much less at C90. So we decided that I was going to do a live Should You Pull for this banner, and then I'm going to cover Queen's Lost Chapter and Llyud's event as well, all in this one video, so that we're all ready for next week and the week after, where we start getting anniversary stuff. And we now know as well that Start Dash banner is going to be something for us to comment on next week, so I'll cover that next week. Now, before I get started, of course, I do always shout out one of my patrons over on Patreon every time I start a new video, and today that person is going to be Syed Carly, who is one of my Ultima patrons, so a huge thank you goes out to you, and I really enjoyed drawing and painting Lulu for you. I love Lulu's design. I know 10's not necessarily one of my favourites, but I totally understand why it's so many other people, so I hope that you enjoy the title card. And if you'd like more details on getting a title card for yourself, then it's all in the links in the description box below. And of course, before we get started, a big shout out to Leo, Bob, and DU for their coverage over on Reddit, Tom Retreat for their infographics, Dissidia Compendium, DB, and info.com for all of their fabulous resources. And yep, all that good stuff as well. So thank you all very much, and let's take a look at what we can expect from this banner. So, as you can see here, and this is all being done in one take, so if I make any mistakes, then forgive me. We can see here that we have Noctis and just Vanille on this banner. Now, in JP, Vanille was replaced by Prompto here. So, the fact that Vanille's being released here and is forecast in JP, or if we go by the JP section, she was forecast to be released alongside Layla, who is in Gilgamesh's batch, which I would estimate for us, even including like the anniversary stuff, is going to be no more than 2 months away. So I'm wondering if Prompto has now been pushed back to where that would have been, so instead of Vanille, because to release her 6 weeks one after the other seems a little nonsensical to me personally. But let me know in the comments below or in the chat what you think is going to happen with Prompto, or Vanille for that matter. Do you think that she's going to get reprinted again in 6 weeks' time, or what do we think's happened to Prompto? Who knows? But let's go ahead and take a look at what we can look at from Vanille. So we already have a Vanille video from like when I did Vanille when we were expecting her to come about, but she obviously didn't. So if you want to know more about what her LD does in particular, then do take a look at that video. So as you can see here, we have the addition to her EX attack, etc., because then you have multiple HP dumps in her kit. Honestly, it's not anything groundbreaking. All it's really doing is making it so that her damage is compatible with units of this current age. So as you can see here, Death now has 3 HP dumps in it, and Brave refunds between each one, and then Assassination becomes a 4-hit group Brave HP attack that hits twice, as opposed to a single Brave attack, which is obviously significantly better. Now, so do you need Vanille now? Not really, not really. I think she's definitely more worthwhile now than she was, because her call ability is still very, very good. Thank you very much for the follow there, Uriel. Like I said, do forgive me, I am doing this Should You Pull live. So things are going to happen. So yeah, Assassination hits twice with HP attacks, which does make it significantly better and makes it a trap actually worth having, because it still dispels and all of that good stuff. But ultimately, you don't have to have Vanille. If you like Faris, you can get by without Vanille absolutely fine if you're just looking for the call ability. In terms of like what you get out of the call ability, it's a bigger defense drop and in a single debuff, so I'd quite like it. But I'm not willing to go super heavy on it because I've already got Faris for defense drops and stuff like that. Or Cypher. There's lots of defense dropping call abilities out there, so if you weren't gunning for Vanille before, don't let the change in the scheduling change your mind. But if you were looking forward to Vanille, now you have more reason to look forward to her, and I hope that those of you who have already pulled for her did well. Thank you very much for the follow there, G-Man. Apparently I need to do these live things more often. But yeah, now let's take a look at Noctis. Now, Noctis does get a pretty hefty rework here. Noctis's rework basically makes it so that he's getting more HP dumps from all of his attacks. So Death Drop Plus or Shooting Star Plus now has double HP dumps in it, so it hits much more heavily, and obviously it still has its launch activation as well. Warp Strike now has 3 HP dumps in it, bearing in mind that you get the follow-up attack from it as well, which is going to add an HP dump to anything that he does. And then Set Warp Advance with his C88 is going to increase his Brave damage cap up by 20%, as well as his attack and everything. So any kind of Brave damage cap up, you'll see as we go forward in this video, increasing your caps is going to be the way to go forward from this point onwards. Now, Conjure Armager gets a buttload more HP dumps and has an increase in its recast speed as well, which is nice. So, honestly, this is fairly par for the course for EX Awakenings. It doesn't fundamentally change them hugely, but it does increase the amount of damage that they do really rather heavily. And then Steel Pirouette, still an incredible attack. I honestly think it's fantastic. Warp Step on its own is worthwhile, just worth the price of admission for Noctis. Nowadays you would want his BT to go there, but it does make a huge difference to him. And then having just all of these things add up to make him a worthwhile damage dealer is really good. However, his burst gets a significant upgrade here, because from the BT Plus you now get more turns from his from the BT effect as well. So you get 5 turns out of his follow-ups and stuff instead of the 3, and you also now get Brave damage cap up and Brave damage up by 50% in addition to all the other effects that you got previously. It's just really good. It's really good. Like, if you want an off-turn damage dealer that turn manipulates and has loads of quirky combos, I have seen JP clears. There's one content creator over in JP that has used Noctis in practically everything from this point onwards, and it's worked. The actual attack itself from the burst is also better now as well, because it's a double HP dump. So on his turns, you're getting 3 HP dumps from Warp Strike, another one from his Warp Strike follow-up, and then 2 more from his follow-ups. He's gonna want some support. He doesn't have the most sort of actual stat buffs from his BT effect, but what he does get is all of this fun and quirky kind of manipulation and, you know, fun things you can do to like with off-turn damage. Core is a thing, you can play around with that. You know, you can pair him up with Machina. Anyone who hogs turns is perfect for Noctis. Anyone that stops him from taking turns, because realistically, you're probably only going to use his BT plus attack rather than his BT phase, because the BT phase is probably better used by somebody else. But I love Noctis, like with his C90 and BT plus. I think it's fantastic, and I've been looking forward to it for a long time, and I plan to use it quite a lot going forward, because 0 turn clears are fun, or even low turn like clears are fun. If you like that kind of playstyle, then Noctis is going to be perfect for you. Okay, so now that we're back in sort of not live mode, let's go and have a look at some of these banners and what we have to expect to come from them. So, now that we've gotten Noctis and Vanille out of the way, we can see that we have Queen's Lost Chapter here, which is going to contain Kater's full kit, including her brand new LD, the return of Queen's full LD kit, and then Fran EX as well as Noel's BT. Now, Queen, if you haven't used her before, has a lot of strong offensive auras, as well as the ability to give party-wide last stand to the party, while also dealing a decent amount of damage through her EX, Resetsu Arousal, and the attacks that follow it. She does get a slight rework to her LD board specifically, which gives her more HP dumps, makes her Judgment Wave last for 8 turns instead of 6, so you get more of that party-wide last stand and more of those offensive buffs. And she also gets Brave Refund after her HP attacks while having Judgment Wave active. Now her C85 and 88, her C88 adds Brave gains up to her C65, which is another nice thing to have. And then her EX obviously does more damage in general, has significantly more HP dumps attached to all of it, including, most specifically, Devastate itself. So Devastate originally would be the way that you ended your combo with Resetsu Arousal, because you would go Ballestra Lunge, Devastate, because you'd get free turns from Ballestra Lunge, and you'd only get a high turn rate from Devastate, which meant that because they're the only attacks you can use with Queen. If you want to know more about Queen, of course, then do go back and check my video on Queen, because she wasn't released too long ago. Then you can go Ballestra, Devastate, and you just get 4 HP dumps out of it instead of 3, and it just makes it so that it's that much stronger. Queen is still a fine character. Like, I like Queen, but I don't love her. I don't think that the party-wide last stand is so restrictive anymore, especially considering that so many Lufenia pluses are as easy as they are going forward, particularly hers. Hers is noteworthy for how easy it can be. But it's just, I feel that Queen is in a place where she's just not needed. Like, if you enjoy her, she's going to do well for you. But so is every character in the game, and I don't think that she stands out enough for my palette personally. Now, Keita, of course, comes out with her LD as well, and Keita, weirdly, doesn't get a rework either of sorts, to at least not to her base skills. She does, of course, get her C85 and her C88 as well, so her C85 is just going to make it so that her EX does a bunch of HP dumps, where she didn't really do that before, because a lot of Keita's abilities relied on the opponent's turn going off. So you had Blizzara, which was an AoE Brave HP that inflicted lock onto her, and then you had Triple Slip, which would then make it so that she had evade and counter, and then you obviously with her EX get Landmine out of it as well. But the attacks themselves didn't do a huge amount of damage on their own. And what Keita's new LD kit seeks to do is to make Keita a lot more damaging on player turns. So, as I said, this gives you a attack, like a 4 times group, a Brave HP attack. So it's just going to do a large amount of damage, split damage, and then you still get Landmine at the end of it, which will then trigger another Brave HP attack on after the enemy turn as well. Now her LD does, again, a buttload of Brave HP attacks and grants her Magic Charge, which turns her into kind of like a Trey clone, where she gets an upgrade to her Charge Shot and Wide Shot, which are her Brave and HP respectively, so that if you don't use those skills on her turn, it kind of stores a charge in her gun, so that you then get Max Charge the following turn, which is a 4 HP dumping attack. It's really hard to keep not saying Brave HP attack, because that's so old school, and now you have to say lots of HP dumps instead, by the way. 4 HP dumps on a single target, 2 HP dumps with AoE 100%, which are what her new Brave and HP Plus equate to. Now, the other interesting thing that you get from this is that you get Ice Resist Down, which you get from a lot of her kit anyway, but you also get Frost Stilling Shot, which is another version of Freeze that is brought along by Setzer. And not only is it Freeze itself, as in they can't gain Bravery, but it also gives them damage resist, like Brave damage resist down by 20%. Now, you could argue you only get 3 uses of this, but you actually only get very few uses of Setzer's Freeze Joker as well. But largely, it's a similar kind of situation when it comes to Keita. Is she good? Yeah. Yes, she is. She's got a lot going for her. The Magic Charge means that her on-turn capabilities are really good, and she's still a solid evade and counter type character. But if you've got an evade like tank like Auron or something like that, you already have that covered. If you've got somebody like, if you have Setzer, then you have Freeze covered. If you want Freeze, then you have access to it fairly readily, especially considering that Setzer's Freeze Joker call does it without needing to pull for an LD either. But I do think that Keita and Queen together are like a nice banner to just spend a few tickets on, if nothing else, because they're both quite cool characters, but ultimately you have to kind of see whether you're actually going to use them or not. And as somebody who likes to kind of blitz or enemies down quickly with large amounts of damage, having an evade and counter character that doesn't have access to those big HP dumps like every turn, maybe not the one for me, but I did get a lot of use out of her in the EX Plus era, and it would be fun to pull her back out again. A quick note before we move on to Llyud and Zell. Keita's call abilities are okay. Like the LD call does inflict Frost Stilling Shot, so if you wanted access to Freeze but you didn't necessarily want to use Setzer, you can use it here. But I'm not a big fan of her base call, her Triple Slip call, because it's not 100% evasion rate, and I am not the kind of person that likes to rely on RNG because it can be very wild, so I don't tend to enjoy this particularly. So you would get use out of the LD call, but not the regular one. Whereas with Setzer, you get Freeze Joker and you get Dive Bomb as well for the LD call, which also has some benefits to it as well. So if I were to pick one or the other, in most cases I would probably take Zell. But this one does have access to the Brave Resist down as well, so maybe you'll feel differently from me. Now, the last banner that we have to talk about today is going to be Llyd's banner, which should arrive next Monday. And Llyud is a very interesting character. The banner is going to contain Llyud, obviously his entire kit, Zell with his LD returning and his C90 awakening. It's going to be the last chance to get Noel's BT as far as I can tell, and it's also going to contain a Middeltellian EX so that we have another synergy character. Now, Zell actually gets some really nice stuff from this banner, because the one thing that he was missing was the things that came off of his EX, so his meteor combos, etc., just weren't really cutting the mustard when it compared to what you got out of his LD, where you were getting free turns, break turns, every turn, lots of damage, things like that. But now you're getting extra bits and pieces from his C90 that really elevate him. He certainly isn't the mean character he used to be anymore. So his LD board gets reworked as well to have more attack, more Brave Overflow. He also gets Brave Gain received up as well, which is kind of nice. It's apparently, according to this, it says this is apparently not the typical Brave Gain up that we've seen on characters according to magazines in Japan, but it's more like the Brave Gain up effect you find on high armors, which can interact with spheres. So it's a bit more malleable than most sort of Brave Gains can be. But any kind of Brave Gains on a damage dealer, usually a really good shot. And then his EX makes it so that he gets a higher recast rate on his EX, which is always great as well. Different Beat itself becomes defense ignoring, triple Brave HP, like hitting 4 times. But more importantly, well, almost as importantly, I guess, Burning Combo and Meteor Combo, which are the double attacks that follow up from his EX, also get significant increases to their damage. So you can get a large amount of AoE damage from Burning Combo. You can get a lot of Brave HP attacks with Meteor Combo. It just all works very nicely, and in combination with his LD, which we got not too long ago, which is still really good, you've got this kind of fast turn rate, breaks, but re-breaking on his LD charges so that he can just keep up with himself, and he can also trigger things like Vayne or any kind of break bonuses. Maybe you're using Caius, he can trigger that really nicely and make batteries out of it. He's actually a very fun and interactive character, and what you get out of his his typical defense drops from his normal attacks is actually really quite good. His defense down is like 90%. It's not something to sniff at on a damage dealer. That on its own is probably worth at least looking at. But again, damage dealer. We have hundreds of those. If you like using Zell, you're gonna get a lot out of him. I would quite like to pick up Zell because I missed him the last time, and I like the interactions he has with a lot of characters that I happen to like. So I wouldn't mind picking him up here as well. And then he just does a lot of damage. There's a lot you can really say about a lot of these characters at the moment. With a lot of the updates, it's just there's a lot of HP dumps going on, and they all seem to be attached to everybody. So pick your damage dealers that are your favourites. And now finally, let's talk about Llyud, or Llyud, or Llyud, or Clyd. Like, there's been so many pronunciations for his name. I'm going to stick with Llyud because it's the one that I know, but if it is incorrect, then do forgive me. Now, Llyd's a very, very interesting character. I actually really enjoy what he brings to the table. So because he's new, we're going to go through each of the skills individually, and we're going to sort of pick apart what they are. So Aura Spear hurts him in order to do a Brave HP attack multiple times that gives you Brave Battery, and it's fairly simplistic in that way. Like, it's a health draining attack. Now, what Llyud will do is he'll drain his own health HP and then regain it through other means, and then he can also heal the party, whilst also providing some pretty monstrous auras and some other pretty spicy stuff while he's at it. Now, Crimson Wings is going to give you Lancet, which gives him the ability to drain HP on any attacks that he does, whilst also doing AoE Brave HP attack and healing himself for them while he's at it. And that's fairly simple as far as his abilities go on his regular ones. His C65 is a party-wide heal, and then with his C88, that gives you some Brave Cap up for the party, which is never a bad thing, as well as party attack up on top of it. And then Fanfare is where we start to get really interesting. So Fanfare, once you've EX plus 85, everything, is a 3 HP dumping attack that gives you party-wide healing. Excess healing is converted into bravery like most HP heals do, and it gives him a stack of a buff that stacks equal to the number of times that you've used Fanfare. Now, it's actually easier to lump this in with his LD bus to tell you exactly what the auras are, but suffice to say, when you have 5 stacks of this, it's a lot. And then the other thing that it does as well is it also fills the other party members' EX gauges while he's at it. So there's a lot of shenanigans to be had with Llyud's Fanfare. So going over his LD first, then we'll come back to what the auras themselves are, because they are rather large. He again hurts himself for 50% HP. Then he heals the party other than himself for a large amount of HP. You then get a 3 HP dumping attack, and then you get his recast gauge filled up so that he can then use Fanfare to fill everybody else's. So, lot of shenanigans with EX gauges. Perfect character to kind of usher in the C90 EX++ era, if you will. And then Winged Warrior gives you Party Brave Overflow, Brave HP, or Brave Attack up for the party, HP damage up for the party, and also gives him Last Stand, which is handy in case something happens to him while he's like caught unawares. Now, if you add up everything he gets from Stirring Melody and Winged Warrior, you're looking at up to 115% attack, 10%, some max bravery, HP regen, brave damage plus 40%, HP damage plus 40%, and then overflows for 55%, and then gain overflow as well. So the auras are pretty fantastic, actually, when you consider that 40% bravery damage and HP damage together are quite rare, especially on a character that's filling characters' EX gauges, and he's not tickling enemies himself. He's doing triple HP dumps, and as much as most characters are sort of keeping up with that now, like we've seen that with Vanille, etc., it's quite a lot of damage to kind of at least have as a support capability, whilst also providing so many different things to the party. Is he required for any content? Absolutely not. But are you going to have a lot of fun with a character like Llyud? Because there's so many combinations of things you can do with characters with slow EX gauges. You could stick him next to Ashe, who also has EX shenanigans, who can then make Llyud's Fanfare go off more often, so you race to 5 quicker. There's lots of fun interactions with Llyud that make him quite desirable for a lot of people. Now, I'm probably not going to go gems on this banner. Probably not, but I would very much like to pick up at least one of the toys on this banner. And then finally, to top off all of these banners, we have Llyud's call abilities, which are, in my opinion, fairly average. Like, his regular call, Crimson Wings, gives him the ability to drain HP with the caller's HP attacks. I mean, maybe VV could make use of this, I don't know, but I don't think it's one that I would go out of my way for. And then Infused Spirit, which is his LD attack, does your triple HP dumps and also gives party-wide Brave Overflow, Gained Overflow, or Stolen Overflow, Gained Overflow, and then Brave and HP damage up for the party as well. So while it's not bad, it's not stand out. It's not something you'll use all the time. If you just want generic kind of number increases, then yeah, you could use this, but I can think of other call abilities I tend to take before I took this one. So we'll quickly go over the Lufenias for Queen's Lost Chapter and of course Llyud's event as well. Now with the Noctis and Vanille banner, at the time of filming this part of the video, I haven't even looked at the event yet, but I will be uploading my clear for it later on in the week alongside my Queen's Lost Chapter as well. But if you wanted to, you could always go and find that on Twitch, because the video on demand I'm sure will be there from when I finished from filming that. This is a bit of a strange video, mixing and matching live footage with not live footage. It's an interesting one to try and tackle all this stuff at once. But Queen's event is quite frankly a joke. Like, the enemies have very little HP. They have 8 million HP each. There's 3 of them. We've fought these guys before. And the tools we have now are just so much better than we had back then that taking these guys out is not going to prove an issue. If you've got Lan and Rain, like BT, Machina, Null, Noctis, you'll probably find you're just going to wipe the floor with them before they've even got a chance to do anything. Now, their main mechanic here is that they don't have a lethal Lufenia orb, but the chances are, certainly if you're not going to let them get a turn, it is going to go off. So what it does is, bear in mind there are 3 of them, it's a group Brave HP attack that delays all of you by 2 turns. So what you're supposed to do here is use a character like Kaita, which evade encounters, and also happens to have freeze on her. because the Lufenia Orb itself asks for evading. Now, you could obviously do that if you wanted to. You could take Galoof or Cater or something like that if you wanted to even 8 if you fancied it. To be able to have that evasion so that you can up the orb. Or you can just freeze the enemies, and even if they get their Lufenia Orb off, they're probably not going to do an awful lot with it. Or like if you wanted to take Warrior of Light or something like that. There's lots of ways around this that you really shouldn't worry too much about. Past that, they don't do an awful lot on their own turns, except for the Strong Blow Plus, which gets past HP damage null. But if they're frozen, they're still not gaining the bravery to deal that HP damage, so you shouldn't really have to worry about that either. And then with Llyud's event, we have the Terror Armor, which is a little bit more of a pain. Not really, though. There's 2 of them, and they have 14 million HP. And the Lufenia Orb for these guys asks you to lose HP from either an enemy attack or your own player ability. This obviously going and playing along with Llyud's abilities to drop his own HP and then regain it. Again, Galoof loses HP due to his own moves. You could use Vivi if you wanted to. There's actually quite a few characters that you could use that do that if you wanted to. Queen, for example, drops her HP to 1 after she uses her EX. If you fancied using Queen, then she's perfect for this. And then past that, the only things you have to worry about really if you're letting the enemies get a turn is the debuff they inflict, which is Cursed Eye. And what that is a stacking debuff that will increase each time the enemy attacks you and reapplies it. And this will poison you to begin with, like bravery poison, then inflict brave damage down or brave resist down or speed down, and then at the last stack it will drain your HP really heavily. So realistically, your best bet is probably to just not let them go in on you too heavily at all. We have so many ways of preventing enemy turns now that it's honestly just the path of least resistance. And if you want my recommendation on the easiest time to have with these Lufenias, that is the thing I'm going to recommend. So now, of course, we have time for Would You Pull, the section of the video where you, the viewer, get your chance to let everyone know whether you would or wouldn't pull on any given banner and why. Now, for obvious reasons, I don't have any polls or anything for Vanille and Noctis' banner because we haven't had any notice and we didn't exactly know what was coming, so I didn't want to put polls out or anything and it be wrong, because that has happened before and it's very embarrassing. But we do have stuff for the other 2 banners, so a massive thank you to all of my patrons for casting their votes and their comments, and let's take a look at what we can see. Now, with Queen's Lost Chapter event, nobody's pulling on this with gems. 38% of people said they were going to use 100 or more tickets, 38% of people said they were going to use less than 100 tickets, and 23% of people said they weren't going to pull at all. I'll possibly throw a few tickets at this. I think both, because I have neither of the LDs on here or Noel's BT even after 500 tickets on Sid, but never mind. I wouldn't mind getting something from this. I'm not too fussed if I walk away with nothing though, especially because I burned myself really hard on the Sid banner. I don't even know why I did. Sometimes we just get a bit cavalier and crazy, and we got a lot of ticket overflow from Ifrit, so I thought, why not? But ultimately, you probably won't use either of these characters all that much going forward. Queen's auras are really good and she does some really funky things, but when you've got the likes of Locke coming up who do auras and a lot of damage and ridiculous BT effects to the party, he kind of fulfills both the support role and the damage role incredibly well, then you're probably not going to use Queen all that much. And the same applies to Cater. The content just doesn't require her right now, and I think that that's a large part of the reason why. With Llyud's banner, I was actually fairly surprised by the results of this one, because only 9% of people said they were going to use gems here, and Llyud was a very hyped character for a long time over in the JP side, so I'm surprised that this number isn't higher. 53% of people said they were going to use 100 or more tickets, which I actually agree with, and I honestly believe is because we've gotten a lot of tickets over the course of Divine Ifrit, New Year's, we know Anniversary's coming, there's lots of extra stuff coming along. And then 28% of people said they were going to use less than 100 tickets, and 9% of people said that they weren't going to pull at all. Now, like I said, Llyud was really hyped over in JP when he first came out, and people wanted to use him for ages. But I think that ultimately, the same thing applies here, because we have the foresight to know whether Lyud's going to be necessary or not, or Zell, or any of these characters. We kind of can look at it and go, well, I could probably run with what I've got and probably be fine, so do I really need to pull here? I ask myself that question all the time, and ultimately it's, if I fancy it, I'll pull on it, and that's kind of the way it is right now. So let's take a look at some comments. Kellen says, Queen and Cater are getting tickets. I don't need to have their kits, but Cater has always been a fun unit, and at this point in the game, any fun I can have is nice. Queen having an EX boost makes me more interested in having her as well. Llyud and Zell are getting gems since Llyud has EX recharge, and the EXs are finally getting the boost they've needed for a year. I enjoyed his kit immensely in JP, and I'll definitely find places for him either on the team or as a call. I don't care for Zell, but I don't have his kit, so if he's nice, yay. If not, Llyud's the prize for me anyway. Interesting that like you were talking about the call there, because when I looked at the call, it's like, it just seems like raw numbers to me, which is fine and it looks pleasant, but it's not something that I would go out of my way to use over the likes of Faris, Ursula, you know, Kurasame, Jack, etc. Like, we've kind of been fairly set in our ways when it came to call abilities. Funnily enough, Vanille is one of those calls that I would use on the regular, but you know, choices are always made between us that are always different. Cobalt Zork says, I'm going to use tickets on both banners, a fair few as there's decent value to be had. I skipped Queen before, so having her and Cater on one banner is tempting. I'll focus more on Llyud though, as his kit interests me a lot. Increased HP damage is not to be sniffed at and really shines with characters with split AoE damage, such as Snow's Retribution, or lots of small dumps like Sid's Mid Brawl. I only know who he is after someone explained where he's from, which is sad because I did play Revenant Wings, but you don't need to love a character from their source game to enjoy them in IOO. Now, I actually really like this comment because of that last bit. I relate to that really heavily because I do think that people are very focused on play your favourites, play only your favourites. Your favourites are the only thing that matter. And I think that's fairly close-minded because what's stopping you from going into a game like this, even though it is a bit fan servicey and you kind of, a lot of people do have favourites going into it, what's stopping you from getting new ones? Some of the best times I've had with this game have been with characters that I either didn't know very well beforehand or didn't even like all that much beforehand. And I grew to like them because of the way they played in this game. I had the same thing with a lot of other games like fighters like Smash Bros and Street Fighter and card games that I've used to play. It's very much the same thing. So if I have a bit of advice for anybody, I would say don't close yourself off to the idea of gaining new favourites because it can happen. Multiracial Live says, I'll be skipping both banners. I have Queen and Zell's LDs already, and I've never been particularly partial to Cater. She gets a solid update where she becomes less of a dodgebot and more of a regular party member, but I just don't find it worth my while. Similarly, Llyud is getting a lot of hype on the back of the EX recharge, but I don't see him doing enough for me to warrant pulling. He can heal and has a huge HP damage bonus for the party, but I'm more interested in boosting my caps these days to mine too much. I also plan to pull for basically all of Locke's banners and our potential global first, so I'm less incentivized to pull for something I only have mild interest in. The cap statement there is huge. HP cap ups are going to be very, very good going forward, which is why I like Noctis's BT, or one of the many reasons I like Noctis's BT as much as I do. HP damage cap is going to be how you increase your damage going forward. You're going to cap bravery. You just are. Stats are so high, everything gets so high that you're just going to cap bravery. So what's the point if you're spilling bravery everywhere that you're not capitalizing on? And you'll find that with brave cap up and HP cap up, you'll actually do a lot more than just with HP damage up, for example. So while I really like Llyud still, I can totally understand where you're coming from on this one. And then finally, Grayson Snyder says Kid Icarus looks kind of fun, and I don't have Zell's LD, so I'll throw 100 or 200 tickets at it, especially since I have an overflow from Ifrit. I don't really care about Zell, to be honest, but if I get the LD, I won't argue. I really quite like Zell, actually, after his C90. I did try a little bit for his LD the first time around, but I think that his EX upgrade makes him into a very fun and interesting character, and I quite like LD-only damage dealers sometimes, because they tend not to get much of a limelight, because BT characters with or BT damage dealers tend to get all of the sunshine. But I quite like Zell, and I think he combos really well with a lot of characters, so I think that if you like him too, you'd probably get a lot out of this. So now we come to the big question of the day. Should you be pulling for any of the banners that are featuring over the next week? Now, in the case of Noctis and Vanille, I imagine that a lot of people who've been playing for a long time already have Noctis, and if you do, I absolutely think he's worth the green. He should not be considered a primary damage dealer nor a support, which means that you are going to need to take more auras and things like that to go alongside Noctis, because his BT aura doesn't actually provide all that much in terms of numbers, but what it does provide is off-turn damage as well as off-turn shenanigans, with thanks to his weird turn zero abilities that he's able to just perform thanks to his LD. And now the larger amount of damage that he does with his BT follow-up means that he's an enabler for other characters. Pair him up with Machina for some fantastic results, for example. Vanille is very much a character that feels the same as she did when I last did my video on her when we thought she was coming out at C80. you know, she's still pretty much the same character. If you're pulling for her, you're probably still pulling for the LD call. Yes, the EX is better, and Assassination actually being an HP attack does help her case quite a lot, but she is a support character that doesn't provide any kind of healing. She's not very buff heavy. She's there for that really powerful debuff, which you can largely just get off of her call ability. So if you're not going to use her all that often, and you have other strong defense-based call abilities like Varys or Tidus, or even Zell, characters like that, you might find that you don't necessarily need to have Vanille. But the fact that she consolidates it all into a nice, neat package means that she's a lot less finicky to use than somebody like Varys. Going over to Queen's banner, both Queen and Cater are very strong like characters in and of their own right for right now. Like, Queen has got really good auras, and she does have party-wide last stand, which is a unique aspect of her. It's certainly rare at the very least. And because her Devastate is now better, her little mini burst phases after her EX are definitely better. But if you've got BT plus damage dealers, you'll probably find the BT auras and C90 stats are enough to carry you on their own, and you don't largely need Queen for a lot of that stuff, and you certainly won't need to survive off of it if you're taking the path of least resistance. And the same thing applies to Cater. They kind of both have the same issue, but presented differently. There's very little content that requires an evade tank going forward. A lot of people will just take the path of least resistance and smash face with big numbers. That's kind of the way the game is at the moment. And if you are in an event that needs an evade tank, most people have Orin at this point. Or even if you don't have Orin, you might have Snow, or even Galoof. Because Orin in particular provides a debuff that is more kind of widespread than Cater's. Like, Cater's is still really good. Like, she has Ice like Imperil, but she doesn't enchant the party for it. But she does provide off-turn damage as well as decent amounts of damage on her own if you've let her HP attacks charge up. But what I'm saying is that while they're both really good, you don't hugely need them. And honestly, that can be said for a lot of characters. But Lluyd and Zell, like Lluyd in particular, is very unique in that he provides the ability to refill his own EX gauge and the EX gauges of others, and kind of you want to keep using it. And he provides really big auras, the HP regen, the healing, and also has something else on top of that that makes him unique. Like, yes, Queen has party-wide last stand. Yes, Ashe does EX recast shenanigans. But no one does it all in one package like Lluyd. Do you need him? Absolutely not. You might find that you don't like his playstyle because you don't use characters that use their EX all that often, or they have fast recast rates on their EXs anyway, so you don't largely need him. And Zell is a damage dealer. There's loads of those. Yes, he has like really unique quirks in that he's got like a really strong defense down debuff attached to his attacks. His LD means he's re-breaking on things all the time, and now his EX means he's hitting really hard, and he has defense ignoring properties all across, like, all over the place. But if you're looking at pulling for Lock, then your whole party is going to have that. So maybe don't go for Zell if you're looking at something like that. But he's good, but he's ultimately still a BT-less damage dealer. Going forward, you'll find that you probably end up using BT plus characters more often than anything else, just because they have something that other characters don't. Whew, so that is everything for today's video. Lots to cover, lots going on, mix and match with live footage, some craziness going on this morning. The next video I have will have footage from that same stream in it. It's all over the place at the moment, but I really hope that I've given you guys some insight into all three of the banners that will be featured between now and next week. So I hope that you guys will get some insight on that, and let me know in the comments below who you're planning on pulling for. Have you already pulled for the Vanille and Noctis? Do you need to? Let me know what you guys think of that in the comments below. Anyways, thank you very much for coming along. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell for notification of any future videos I might be making. And that's going to be it from me. So thank you all very much, and I'll see you later. Take care.